Oh, no, 7 o'clock on my phone. Yeah, your watch is fast. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Powers, President of Houston Beekeeper Association. Welcome everybody here. Especially welcome all our guests. I see we have like 10 people guests tonight, which is great. So our agenda is, if you get here a little early, you can ask the people who are here any kind of questions about beekeeping you want to ask. That's kind of over right now. Then, we've got a few announcements. Then we'll have our guest speaker. And then around 8:25 after our guest speaker, we'll do some door prizes. And then 8:30 we adjourn or thereabouts. And then after that, all the people who are doing mentoring and mentors and mentees kind of meet over here in this corner. And we'll talk about, a lot of people are getting their bees like starting this weekend, and another weekend or so after this, they're getting them all in. So make sure we got somebody coming to your house to help you get your bees in the box that when you get them. So it'll be great. Upcoming events on the 25th, which I guess is next Tuesday, is Harris County Beekeepers. The 13th of May is Houston Natural Beekeepers. 16th of May is our beekeeper meeting, and we'll have our topic will be honey extraction, led by Mike Simmons. Then the 17th of June is Texas Beekeepers Seminar Summer Clinic in Conroe. And on the 20th is our June social, and that'll be at Axelrad Beer Garden. And we can order pizzas from there too. And then on the 9th of September is the Brazos Valley Beekeeping School in Bryan, Texas. So those are things to have in your calendar. All that stuff's in the SCEP. Everybody who's on our emailing list gets the SCEP once a month. You can get all that stuff, find all the information you need to know. So, Mike, if you want to introduce our speaker.
Hi, I'm Mike Simmons. I'm the VP. Before I introduce our speaker tonight, I just wanted to do a little show and tell since it's starting to heat up now. These things are like a lifesaver. You can get them for like $20 on Amazon. It's got disco lights. But yeah, they're not really actually that fond of it, but it doesn't piss them off too bad. But one thing it'll do is it'll keep the sweat from getting in your eyeballs while you're working. It really makes a huge difference. I highly recommend it. Here though, it just has these vents on the side. I don't really like this one. I never hardly wear it. I use this one most of the time. This one goes like that. This one, yeah, you just point it up at your face and put your veil over that. It's kind of goofy looking, but it works really well.
Comfortable is comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's looking at you at the bee yard anyway. Yeah. The other thing I like to wear too, it's not hot enough yet. Usually like in June, July when I'm working bees, is I'll wear straight up ice vests. You can get those on Amazon. They're kind of pricey. They're about 100, 120 bucks. But you put ice packs in it that you freeze overnight, and they're replaceable. So they last about an hour. You pull ice packs out, put some more in. It'll keep you cold. Yeah, those are the two main, that and an ice chest full of cold water, and then beer for later. All right, tonight's speaker is going to be Michael Hardman. He's going to cover queen rearing. Michael Hardman's the owner of Spicy Fly Honeybees, right?
Yes, sir. All right.
Oh, hi everybody. Today we're going to learn about queen rearing. So before we get started, I'm just kind of curious, who here has ever bought a queen? By raise of hands. Okay, quite a few people. Who here has ever bought a queen from outside of Texas? Wow, I'm so proud of you guys. So queen rearing is a lot of work. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of scheduling. But really we do queen rearing when the queens are doing their queen rearing. And if you're curious about when that is, did I do it wrong? Oh, there you go. So that's that's when we do our queen rearing, okay, guys? It's during swarm season. The reason why this is a good time to do queen rearing is because that's when the queens are making queens, or that's when the bees are making queens. So there's a few situations where a beehive will make a new queen. And understanding those situations is really important to being able to make queens yourself. So what are the, I guess there's three. What are the three, if anyone knows, raise your hand. What are the three situations in which a beehive will make a new queen?
Queen dies.
Right, queen dies. Supersedure, swarming, right? Those are really those are the situations where a beehive will make a queen. When the old queen dies or is removed somehow. So what happens when a old queen dies? What kind of queen do they make? Like say you were to get into a beehive and pull the queen out and throw her away. What kind of queen would that beehive create? An emergency queen, right? So do you think an emergency queen is as good as a swarm queen or a supersedure queen? Right? I would say that a swarm queen is probably going to be the best, and a supersedure queen is pretty close, because a supersedure or a swarm queen, that larva was meant to be a queen from the time it hatched. Okay, so they picked that thing out, or that egg was laid in a queen cup. So when that egg very first hatched, it was destined to be a queen. Those bees, from the time that larva is out of that egg, they're feeding it to be a queen. And I would wager that a queen that's raised from a queen cup is always going to be better than a queen that's raised from an emergency cell where the larva was already a couple days old and it was originally intended to be a worker. So, let's be honest about queen rearing for a little bit. It's a lot of work, guys. I see a lot of YouTube videos out there where people are like, yeah, just like do this and throw the graft in there and you got your queens. There's a little bit more to it than that. I think Mike, he emailed me and he was like, hey, he's like, we had this, I think it was Sue Kobe. Yeah, I did a presentation on queen rearing. It was just a little too intense. And he's like, could you like try to explain this in a way that makes sense? And I was like, yeah, I'll try, but there's a reason why it's hard, because there's a lot to it. So I'm going to try to make it as simple for you guys as I can. But if you have any questions, you can always email me or give me a phone call or whatever. I'll come out and help me do it, and I'll show you. So it requires specialized knowledge, and it's not knowledge that you can just get off of YouTube, unfortunately, or read in a book. Really, it comes from just doing it. And so it's hard to translate something like that. Like, it's hard to translate how you position a grafting tool and how you move it to get a larva out of the cell. It's not something you can just teach like in a book. So those are the specialized knowledge stuff. The queen rearing schedule is unbelievably unforgiving. Okay. You guys know why, right? Because that queen's going to hatch on day 13 after the larva has emerged, whether you're ready for it or not. And so if you have a nucleus colony, or you have a starter finisher, you have 50 cells ready to go, and you get sick the day you're supposed to pull those cells out, what do? Yeah, you're going to be out there in your bee suit, sick as a dog, pulling those queen cells out, because if not, that first queen's going to come out and kill the rest of them. And so unless you have someone to help you, if you have some buddies, you can say, hey, I'm dying over here. Can you come and drop these cells for me? And then they get there and they realize they have to catch all the queens before they drop the cells. So that's fun. So I tell people all the time that are wanting to learn how to do queens, I'm like, a mated queen only costs $40, guys. Like, at the end of the day, it's $40 compared to like what it takes to get these things mated and get them into a cage and get workers in there. Like, after I explain all this stuff to you guys, you'll go, that $40 looks a whole lot better. Okay. If I could charge what I felt like it was really worth, I'd be charging $100 a queen, like for sure. But this is the market. There's people who do a lot of this stuff and they set the price. So that's what I do. So let's say you guys decide that you're going to raise your own queens just for the fun of it, or just to learn, or maybe you have 50 colonies and you don't want to spend $30 a queen, $800 on queens to requeen your 50 colonies. So you can raise superior queens from less than ideal stock under ideal conditions than you can from ideal stock under less than ideal conditions. So this is actually a quote I took from Michael Palmer. Do any of you guys know who that is? Michael Palmer is a genius, all right? His beekeeping and his queen rearing style, I really mimic it often. If you haven't watched his presentation on the sustainable apiary, I highly recommend it. He goes into detail on his queen rearing process, and it's very, very informative. And I use his process for my own queen rearing. Michael Palmer, yeah. So what does this even mean? What does it mean that you can raise superior queens from less than ideal stock under ideal conditions? The example I like to give is, like, say you have a tomato plant and you have this award-winning tomato plant that's the best genetics you've ever, seen in your life. And then you have this, tomato plant that just come from Lowe's, okay? If you take these amazing seeds from this, grand champion tomato plant and you plant it in gravel and hardly ever water it, you're going to get plants that aren't very good. Okay. Even though the genetics are really good genetics, you're going to get terrible plants. And the same can be said for, a tomato plant that's not so great genetic wise. If you give it really good soil and really good sunlight and water, you'll get a huge tomato plant that's amazing. And so this comes into like selection and stuff. So people are always kind of like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to do my queen rearing because I don't have 1,000 colonies to pick from to make my own queens. I want to, get the best queens I possibly can. Well, the best queens you can possibly get are the ones you make yourself for several reasons. The main reason is they haven't been stuck in a cage and banked or shipped or flown across the country. So there's some heat tolerances and some cold tolerances that happen with queens. If they go above a certain temperature for a certain amount of time in transit, it degrades their quality. Same thing with cold. If they go below a certain temperature for a certain period of time in transit, their quality is going to be less. And so you're taking that chance whenever you have queens shipped to you, or even when you go to pick up a queen from your local guy and you stick it in your pocket and you're driving home on a cold day. Well, if you're driving an hour and it's 50 degrees, or if you got the AC blowing on your shoulder, you're going to degrade the quality of that queen. So in nature, a queen, the only time she ever leaves the hive is either when they're swarming or when she's mating, okay? When she's mating, she's not a laying queen. She's going out to mate. They'll do it on days that are nice and warm. She's flying out for, 30 minutes or so, or however long it takes her to mate, and she's coming back. The rest of her life, she spends inside of the hive where it is 94 degrees. And that's where she stays until they're ready to swarm. So when you take a queen out of a mating nuke, put it in a cage, stick it on your dresser or on your counter or wherever for a day or two, I would argue that that queen's not going to be as good as a queen that you could take right out of a nuke and stick in another hive immediately. So we already kind of went over that. So this is Mike Palmer right here. Really, I get a lot of inspiration from this guy. I really hope you guys check him out. He kind of coined the term, I guess. This is what he calls this process. He calls it the Brother Adam 10/10. Do you guys know who Brother Adam is? He's like, yeah, he's the one who started the Buckfast. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Buckfast Abbey. He's the one who started the Buckfast bees. He wrote a lot of stuff down, believe it or not, and you can still read it today. It's amazing. So Mike Palmer read a bunch of his stuff and decided he was going to make some queens. And I have to agree with Brother Adam and Mike Palmer when it comes to queen rearing. So we talked about the 3 conditions that are going to be used to make a queen, right? We're either going to have a swarming queen, we're going to have a supersedure queen, or we're going to have an emergency queen. So how would we make an emergency queen? Well, it's easy. You get in, just kill the queen, and the bees will make another queen, right? But you're probably not going to get a very good queen that way. Supersedure, it's like, I guess you could just wait for your queen to die or wait for her to get old, but you can't really make a lot of queen cells that way, right? They're just going to make a couple maybe, and then you're just waiting for the supersedure to happen. So it's not really an economical way to do it, or like timing wise. Like if you need a queen in 20 days, you can't rely on that. So really, it comes down to swarming, and so swarming. That's how we make queens, is swarming. So when does a beehive swarm? Right now. So what causes a beehive to swarm though? What is it in nature that's happening that's causing a beehive to swarm?
It's warm, it's crowding, it's springtime.
Sorry? Yeah, lots of bees, lots of resources coming in, time of year, the daylight hours. The bees just know it's time and they start making queen cells. So one of the ways you can make that process happen manually is by doing what's called the 10/10. And this is what I do. So talk about selection a little bit. We'll talk about selection. We'll go back to that one. Right now, let's talk about this. So the 10/10. You go out and you find your strongest beehive, okay? If you have 50 beehives, you find your strongest beehive, the one that's gonna swarm the soonest, okay? And what you do is you stick a queen excluder on top of it. And then you take a deep box and stick it on top of that queen excluder. And then you go to your other beehives and you pull out 10 frames of brood that's about to emerge, okay? And you stick those 10 frames in that deep box that's on top of that already really strong beehive. What do you think that's gonna do to that beehive? It's gonna make it swarm. That thing is gonna swarm, because if it's already booming and wanting to swarm and you put 10 frames of emerging brood on there, that thing's gonna explode, okay? It's gonna be a monster beehive. And they're absolutely going to swarm. So you do that. The other thing that's happening there is when you put that queen excluder in there, that queen can't go up into those frames and lay. So what's happening is those frames are starting to become frames that bees can't rear queens from, right? Because after 10 days, all that larva will be capped and they won't be able to make queen cells off of it. And so then what you do, you come back 10 days later after you've done that, you pull that box off of there, you move the original beehive over. I like to turn it around as well. I think Michael Palmer does that as well. So you take the top box off that has the 10 frames of brood that you put on, take the original beehive, move it over, turn it around, and then you stick this 10 frame box on that original bottom board right here, boom. And now this box doesn't have a single larva in it that they can make a queen with, okay? And then you get into this other beehive over here and you pull out frames and you shake bees into this, what I call a cell starter. You shake bees in there. It's best. Some people don't do this. I'm guilty, honestly. I think Mike Palmer would have my head if I said this. Sometimes I'll just look at the frame and see if there's a queen on it. And if I don't see a queen, okay, great. I'll shake the bees in there and I'll stick it back in. I'll grab the next one, check for a queen, shake it in there. Really the way you should do it is you should put a queen excluder on there, put a deep box on it, and shake the bees into that top deep box, okay? And then you can smoke them down in there. So you're literally taking, so let's say the original colony was a double deep. You're taking 2 deep boxes worth of bees and you're cramming them into a single deep box. And the single deep box doesn't have anything in it that the bees can make a queen with. And what do they do when that happens?
Swarm. Swarm.
Well, they can't make queens in that box, right? There's nothing in there for them to make queens with.
Swarm.
They freak out. That's what they do. They have they lose control, okay? Like it's really funny watching it happen. It's kind of sad, I guess. I don't know. But they will run all over the box. They're crying. They're all upset. They're all, you know, like they're boiling over. Like, let's see if I can go back here. See this? That's what you want your cell starter to look like. That might actually need a few more bees. Okay, like overwhelming with bees. So strong with bees, you can't see the box. That'll be a really good cell starter. So just FYI, this isn't actually a cell starter. This is just a good representation of what you want it to look like. That was an owl box I got off someone's tree. But if I could stick some grafts in that thing, I would. It looks amazing. But when you set up a cell starter, that's literally, that's what you want. You want that many bees. Like you want it to be so overflowing with bees that you couldn't squeeze another bee in there if you wanted to. And inside that box, there's nothing that they can make a queen with. And they're losing their minds. They're going, we're doomed. Our colony's going to die. We can't make another queen. And they know this. And that is called hopelessly queenless. Okay. So you might be saying, wasn't that the emergency method? Right? We just took the queen away and they can't make a new queen. Normally, if you take the queen, that's emergency. Well, it is. So we're kind of combining the two. We're combining the swarm impulse with the emergency impulse. So they want to make a queen emergency because their queen's gone. And they can't though. And then there's so many bees in that box that they also want to swarm. So what do you do next? Well, you wait a few hours, you go and put on some music, relax. Beekeeping's supposed to be fun, okay? Just take it easy for a little while. And you come back in the afternoon. And personally, what I like to do is I like to throw a feeder on there, okay? Bees want to make queens when there's a flow. Without a flow, bees won't make queens. So if you're not feeding your bees while you're putting grafts in that thing, they probably won't draw very good cells, even if you have a lot of bees. So you got to feed them. And then if you can see this frame right here is a pollen frame. That's the frame you're going to stick right next to your grafts. All right. You want to find a frame that is so full of pollen that there's like nothing but pollen on it. You want to just amazing pollen frame. This one's okay. It could be better than that, but that's usable. That's something I would stick next to my grafts. So you go home, you hang out for a little while. Later in the afternoon, you go get in your breeder colony if you have one, or you know, the colony you've selected. I guess we can talk about selection a little bit. So selection. So what colonies do you graft from? Do you guys even know how to graft? Okay, so grafting, let's talk about that just for a second. So grafting is basically you're just pulling the right age larva out of a cell and you're putting it in an artificial queen cup. Okay, and so these are artificial queen cups right here. So what you do is you graft a larva out of a cell and you stick one larva in each one of those cups. And that's grafting. So you go home, you pick out your best colony, right? You do liquid nitrogen testing or VSH assays, or you record how much honey they produced last year. Maybe they're just the nicest bees in your yard and you just want nice bees. Whatever it is you like, you pick your favorite colony and you pull a frame out and you graft up. I would put, you know, between 45 and 60 grafts and a 10 frame cell starter finisher, which is going to be this guy. They're this old right here. Okay, that's less than 24 hours old. They're brand new. Like the younger, the better. Because like we talked about, a larva that has been destined to be a queen from the time it emerged, I believe that's going to be a better queen than if you were to get a 3-day-old larva that was being made into a worker and then they changed it to be a queen. So I like to get the youngest possible larva I can. This picture right here is a picture I took of my microscope, and that little spatula thing you can see there, that's a Chinese grafting tool, the tip of a Chinese grafting tool. I should have brought one with me. It's a tiny, tiny little tool. That larva is less than 24 hours old. The reason why I had that microscope out is because sometimes I would pull a larva out and I couldn't tell if it was on the thing. It was so small, I couldn't see it. And so I just stick it under there and go, okay, it's there. And then I'd put it in the cup. That's how small you want it to be. You want it to be tiny, like absolutely tiny. And if you do that, you'll get great queens. You can go up to like 24 hours old. Sometimes I almost prefer 24-hour-old larvae because they usually have a little bit more royal jelly in the cell that you can pull out with them. And I feel like that helps. But younger the better. So you graft. And honestly, I wish I had more time because I could probably spend an hour just talking about grafting. So for now, I just have to say, you graft and you take your grafts out. This is what a graft looks like, right? This is after they've made the cells, but it's just the cups and the bars. You take it out, you stick it in that beehive, the starter, the one that we set up earlier in the day. You stick it in there. You stick a pollen comb right next to that graft. You put some feed on that thing, or hopefully you put feed on it in the morning. That way they're packing it in already before you put the graft in. And then you come back in 10 days and you pull it out and this is what you have. Giant queen cells, okay? And I'm telling you, when you put that graft in there, those bees, they go, oh, and they go right to work. And they jump on that graft and they turn all of those things into queen cells. Well, hopefully more than 80%, right? Sometimes I'm not very good with the grafting tool and I injure the larva, and that's consequence of that. You can see the ones that I missed there. So when you're shaking bees, or I should say on the frames that are in that box, this is actually a really important step. Sorry. So when you take that box off the first time and you're pulling the frames out, you got to look for queen cells because they may have started queen cells in that box just for swarming because there's so many bees. You cannot have a queen cell and a cell builder. Okay. I'm going to say it again, just so you guys understand. You cannot have a queen cell and a cell builder. Do I need to say it again? Cannot have a queen cell and a cell builder. And if you've ever experienced that, you'll know why I had to say it 3 times, because it is like the worst feeling in the world. You go through all this effort, you do all these things, you do your liquid nitrogen testing, your VSH assays, you graft, you pull the perfect pollen frame, you stick your grafts in there, they start pulling them out, you check them like a day later, you're like, ooh, yeah, like these look good, good take. And then you come back in a week and they're all gone because that queen cell emerged and killed all of them. Oh, yes. Yeah, so liquid nitrogen testing, it's a freeze kill test for hygienic behavior. Yeah, so here, let's go back to that so I can show you what it is. It's this. So this is just part of my selection. That's why I put it on there. This is what I do for my own queens. I pull frames of brood out. I twist a can, just like a can of corn that I empty out and take the top and bottom off. And I twist it into that brood. And then I pour a bunch of liquid nitrogen in there. It's kind of fun, actually. I don't know if you've ever worked with liquid nitrogen, but it's like, it's so cold that it's like, it almost seems like it's not cold, it's hot. It cooks. It's almost like a cooking thing more than it is a freezing thing. And so you pour it in there and it sizzles and freezes. And these cans, that they're white because that's frost that's on them there, right? You freeze the brood, you let it thaw out a little bit, you take the can off, and then come over here a little bit. This is a result right here, okay? So this is where I froze the brood. And then I stick that frame back in there. I wait 24 hours. I come back, pull that frame back out. I look at it. I record how many cells were cleaned out, how many were not. Compare that to the original picture that I took. And I can get a percentage hygienic behavior that way. This one was really easy because they just removed everything. It was just 100%. And then the liquid nitrogen actually spilled right here, you can see on both sides. It spilled out from under the can and went this way. And they even removed all that too. So that was a really good one. So hygienic behavior is going to help them with foul brood, chalk brood, sac brood virus. It's basically, it's their ability to keep their hive clean and free of disease, okay? And then this right here, this stuff, that's the VSH assay that I'm doing on that frame that I did the liquid nitrogen on.
Is that hygienic behavior predictable from the bees, if their genetics or not?
Like,
You start with bees that created this, right?
Mhm.
Is that an indicator, or you gotta do the test to get running?
yeah, I mean, you got to test it to know. So when you first start, in most populations, like in a commercial population that's not doing this, maybe 1 in 20 colonies will exhibit a hygienic behavior at that level. But if you've been doing it for 3 generations, almost all of your colonies do that. And so 24 hours, yeah. And then this is, like I said, this is a VSH assay. So this is the result for the liquid nitrogen testing, which is 100% hygienic. And then I did a VSH assay, which scored a 4. Yeah, so VSH stands for Varroa sensitive hygiene. Yeah, Varroa sensitive hygiene. Varroa sensitive hygiene is a behavior trait of bees that helps them be resistant to Varroa mites. They're able to detect unhealthy brood odor from Varroa mites in the cell. They either uncap it and remove it, or some will have an uncapping, recapping behavior where they uncap the cell, they interrupt the mite's life cycle, and then they recap it over. And so what you can do is you can uncap the cells manually. You can pull bees out. You can record the number of reproductive mites, non-reproductive mites. You can get a percentage VSH that way. And so that's what I was doing in that picture. From the welding supply store, like air gas welding supply stores. Yeah, it doesn't require any special permit or anything. Like anyone can go buy it. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's like, there's like gas supply stores for like welding and stuff. Yeah, a lot of them you just have to have a proper doer. If you show up with like a gallon jug, they're gonna laugh at you until you leave. So you gotta have a good.
You can do a halfway level just using freezing jet to kill the whole plant.
Yeah, yeah. What they used to do is they used to take and just cut a chunk of brood out, put it in the freezer, and then use toothpicks to put the chunk of brood back in the frame, and then they'd stick it in and see that way. This is just a much easier way to do it, where I don't have to like take chunks of brood home and put it in the freezer. I can just do it right then and there and put it back in and come back. But those are 2 really important processes for me in my selection. I also select for temperament because I don't think anyone likes bees that staple your socks to your ankles. Okay. I like my bees to be a happy medium. That's what I tell everybody. So if you're looking for like the calmest bees you've ever seen, go find somebody else, because that's not me. I like my bees to be a medium because I feel like they are better able to defend themselves and defend themselves against pests and other things too. So I feel like, workable, on a good day, you probably don't have to wear gloves. On a bad day, you have to wear gloves. That's kind of the level I like my bees at. You may select for honey production. I select based on this stuff, temperament. If my bees aren't producing honey, then basically they just don't survive winter. So I am selecting for honey production in that way. I let my bees keep all the goldenrod honey in the fall. And if that's not enough for them to survive, then they just die. And then I don't select them because they're dead. So it's really easy. So natural selection is king, okay? Yeah, tomball. Most of my yards are actually in like Waller, Magnolia, Hockley, that area. I have a lot over there. But I live in Tomball, so when people come to pick up queens and stuff, that's where they come. But people are coming to pick up nukes actually next weekend, but they're coming out to my Waller yard to do that. So I don't know if anyone here bought a nuke from me, but that's where we're gonna go. So we got our queen cells going. We made sure to go through every single frame and cut out all the queen cells, right? I'm gonna say that again. And you come back 10 days later and you have these magnificent, amazing queen cells, okay? And you're like, okay, like I did it. This is This is the end result. Like, perfect. Well, that's the easy part, guys. Sorry to tell you. That like making cells is not the hard part. The hard part is setting up these things and getting mated queens. The reason why is because the drain on resources for setting up stuff like this, shaking bees for minis or if you're using like 2-frame nukes, getting these things to survive is definitely an art just in itself. They're a tiny beehive that's like 6 inches by 5 inches by 6 inches or something, or 8 inches, something like that. They're tiny. And so they're really fragile on the very first set. When you first set them out, if you get like, you know, a cold snap, or like a random cold snap that comes through, you can lose like 30% of them. So it's just a numbers game with these things. So if you want to make 20 queens, you need to set up 50 of these to just make sure. Right now I'm running 104 of these. I have 104 of those. And the cold snap that came through this spring was pretty rough on them. And then I've had some issues with possums and stuff. So it's set up way more mating nukes than you think you're going to need. Trust me, you'll be better off that way. So if you're just going to requeen some colonies, like if you have, you know, beehives that you just want to put new queens in, you can either just take the old queen out, give her the hive tool test, throw her on the ground, put her in your pocket for your swarm commander, whatever lure it is. But you can put a queen cell in there with a queen protector on it, a queen cell protector on it, and that works well. You can just requeen all your colonies with queen cells. But when that queen emerges, sometimes the bees don't like her and they kill her. Sometimes she goes to mate and a dragonfly eats her, or a bird gets her, or a lizard, or whatever it is. And so you have to go back and make sure you put queens back in those boxes or combine them with other boxes when you're requeening. But I would say I have about an 80% success rate with these. If the ones that survive the initial setup, I'm getting about 80% of my queens back mated, and I can go out and catch them. Catching queens is fun at first. You're gonna grab a little tiny frame out. You're gonna grab her by the wings. Okay, this is what I do anyways. Grab my cage, put her in there, grab 5 worker bees, cap it, goes in my little bucket. Okay. I made that sound really easy, right? Right? It's after you do it a few times, it's kind of like that. But the first time you're like trying to catch these bees and you're like, oh, I got one. Okay. And then it's like trying to sting you and you let it go and it flies off. And you're like, oh, okay, like I'll get another one, you know? And sometimes catching a queen and putting her in a cage can take like 15 minutes. And you're like looking at your other 50 nukes going, wow, we're going to be here a little while. So who was it? There's another beekeeper on YouTube. He said something that what did he say? He's like, are you a man or a mouse? And I don't know why that kind of resonated with me. So you kind of, when you're catching queens, you just kind of have to think, am I a man or a mouse? And then, you know, just do it. And you're going to get stung because when you catch queens, you can't wear leather gloves or anything. You got to have that dexterity. So you're doing this with either bare hands or with like latex gloves on. So yeah, but that queen rearing process, there's a lot more in it. There's a lot more that goes into that stuff, but that's the basic principle of it. Is you want to take your strongest beehive, stick a bunch of brood on top of it, make it into a monster beehive that wants to swarm, separate off the part that can't make a new queen, shake a bunch more bees into that. Okay, they'll become hopelessly queenless. And they'll want to swarm. They'll be this massive, strong colony that doesn't have the ability to make a queen. Stick a pollen frame in there, put some feed on them, graft, drop your graft in later that day. Come back 10 days later, pull your queen cells out, put them in your mating nukes, or use them to requeen your colonies. That's the real abbreviated version of that. So that's the process I use. That's the brother Adam 10/10. This guy does a much better job of explaining this than I do, but he's kind of the one who really refined it. Let's see. So yeah, if you can master each one of these steps, it really doesn't take a whole lot to just make a set of queens. And so I guess some of the questions you guys might have is like, how many colonies does it take to do this? Right? Like, what if I only have like 3 or 4 beehives in my backyard? Can I do this? Well, yeah, you can, but there's a trade-off. Okay. The way Mike Palmer does it, he claims it's sustainable, and the way he does it, it is, but it requires you having brood factories, and he explains what a brood factory is. But if you just have 3 beehives in your backyard, you don't have a brood factory, so it's not sustainable. Okay. If you have 3 beehives in your backyard, you could probably do this once, and that's it for a season. You're going to take your strongest one out of 3. You're going to take 4 or 5 frames out of the other 2, stick it in that one. You just weaken these ones down. This one's super strong. You're going to separate it and do the same thing. And then you could put it all back together and go back to 3. And you may not have lost that much, but in my experience, it's always it's a net loss for the colonies that you're pulling from because you weaken them so much.
So when you're making your box full of bees,
Uh-huh.
what's the status of the wraps? Already wrapped it, just waiting.
No.
Load this box up and a bunch of wraps while that box is kind of
Right.
upset.
Yeah. So when you make your box hopelessly queenless and they're all crying, wishing they had a queen, that's when you just go home and you have a beer and you hang out for the day and you just relax. Okay. And then later that day in the afternoon is when you graft, because you want them to be in that state for a certain amount of time, right? If you set that up immediately and then you go get in your truck and you graft right then and there and put it in there, you're going to get a lot less of a take. Like, you're not going to get a take like this. You get like half of that maybe, because a lot of those bees still have that queen mandibular pheromone on them. They don't even know they're queenless yet. If you drop grafts in a colony that doesn't know it's queenless yet, they're not going to accept it right away. And some of those grafts will probably, they'll dry up. The bees won't feed them like they should. So waiting, 4, 5, 6 hours, you do this process in the morning, you go hang out for the day, come back later in the afternoon and put your grafts in. And that's the best way to do it. Did anyone have any questions?
This is for graft and raising bunch of food.
Yeah.
Why not address it just doing splits and let bees do the work for a time?
Right? Because then you're making emergency queens.
If you get a week period.
Yeah. And the whole point of this is, are you going to make great queens? Or are you going to make not great queens?
Well, what qualifies great? Is it amount of bees they can raise, or is it the quality of
Both.
mic resistance?
Well, it's a subjective thing, honestly. So like, if you want your bees to be calm, make lots of honey and build up good, and that's what you consider a great beehive, and that's what you're selecting for, then you have a queen that does that really well. That's a great queen, right? If you have a queen, if you're selecting for mite resistance, if you're whatever it is you want out of your bees and you're selecting for that, and you make queens and they're doing that very well, those are great queens. Emergency queens, I just don't think will ever be as good as a swarm queen. So yeah. Uh-huh. Right. Yeah, I mean, right. Yeah, so I guess let's go back to this one here. Right here, this one. So just my opinion, I guess, kind of opinionated guy. Emergency queens are fine. Like if you want to do a walk away split, let them make an emergency queen. There's no problem with that. That's what they do in nature. Like that queen will probably be fine. But is that queen going to be as good as a queen that I make? Probably not. Right. So you can raise far superior queens from less than ideal stock under ideal conditions. An emergency queen is not being reared under ideal conditions, in my opinion. Ideal conditions would be that egg was laid with the intention of making it a queen. That is ideal conditions. They weren't going to make that larva a queen to begin with an emergency queen. They were going to make it a worker. And then they changed their minds because they didn't have a queen. And they're like, oh no, let's hurry and just make this into a queen. And so I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right, except for one thing. I'm pulling larva that's less than 24 hours old. Oh, okay. Sorry, I misunderstood you. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I looked an hour later, she's got another one. I put that in.
Yeah.
You know, it takes longer because they're smaller. It takes 5 weeks for them to mature and go on the bait flight. It just takes
Right.
longer. But as far as quality, you know, the queen cells are big and they come out bigger. But I would look and just see, I found a little queen and every couple of weeks you see her grow. It just took more time.
Yeah.
I'll see after the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
how they- but
for
I got
sure.
close to it just hit me. I said, she's laying an egg right there.
Yeah.
You know, they made that egg that she laid. I don't know, but I mean, she
Right.
was sitting there pumping eggs and all these cells.
What he was looking at,
Yeah, but there was on that first
Yeah.
egg, there was 4 queen emergency cells right in that area that she was playing. So I would.
Yeah. No, what you're talking about works great for just like doing a few queens in your backyard. Like just making a few like,
Yeah, I had 2 eyes.
yeah. Yeah. You could just,
That method I did.
yeah, you could just take like 3 frames splits. You could take like a nuke box and put 3 frames of bees and brood and honey and stuff in each one and just let them make a new queen. And that works.
It just-
That works.
just hit me as I pulled that first frame. I said, "Gosh,
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to my cotton method.
Yeah. Right. NICOT. I tried the NICOT method. I didn't really care for it, honestly. It works for some people really good. I guess it's another thing, I guess, that's probably a little bit better for someone who doesn't have as many hives because when I graft 180 cells and it's hard to get her to lay 180 eggs in an NICOT thing. So yeah, but any other questions?
Experience an issue with like these creating stuff. My issue is that I don't have very little control over my drone production areas.
Yeah.
Like, so- and,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. In this area, that's a big problem. So there's really not a whole lot you can do about that if you don't have like, 100 colonies to put around your bee yard where you're mating queens out. If a
I don't think that there are a lot of bees
yeah,
The trick to that is try different yards.
yeah,
If you don't have a yard, just ask another beekeeper to bring bees over while they mate. Like I have 4 different yards. I have one yard, they never come back. That yard's not made queens.
hmm
And it's not that far from another yard. And then this other yard I have, it's maybe 2 miles from it. Queens always come back mated, they're always really good, really productive. And I have another yard they come back and it's super spicy. So, and it's really not hard to pass. But
you can do like drone saturation in an area. It just takes time. Lots of hives speeds it up for sure. But if you have like 10 colonies with drone comb in each one, pumping out drones, if you're doing that every year for like 3 years, the genetics in that locale are for sure going to change. They're going to be different. They may not be what you want, but they're definitely going to be influenced by that. So drone flooding is definitely an important part. Like getting mated queens it's half drones, like half the equation is drones for sure. So if you could make the best virgin queens you've ever seen with the best genetics ever. And if she goes out and mates with a bunch of really not good drones, then you're going to have 50% good bees, which is fine, I guess. I don't know. But with the VSH traits and stuff, 50% is all it takes to be okay. So as long as you have 100% on that first queen.
How do you counter the natural beekeepers that contend you want to let nature do the selection? You know, either they survive or die. Or
Oh yeah, I tell them that.
How do you counter that?
Yeah, I tell them bees aren't native to North America in the first place anyways. So they're just like a chicken. It's like putting a chicken out on the streets and saying, hey, let nature take care of it. Yeah, nature will. A coyote will get that thing and eat it right away. So yeah, exactly, right? So, I mean, honeybees aren't native to North America. They were imported here in the 1600s. And we imported them up until the 1920s when it was banned. And the bee stock that we have here in the US is basically the same stock we've had since then, minus some that have come in from South America and some that have come in from north of Canada.
Well, they brought in some Russian bees up on recently.
Yeah, they've been bringing in some different genetics, but I'm not sure that the Russian bees were brought in since the 20s. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong on that.
I thought they brought in the 80s.
Sucobi, yeah, Sucobi. Yeah, Sucobi has a New World Carniolan. She's over on an island where she has isolated mating yards, which is really amazing. And she was able to import Carniolan sperm, basically, and be able to create that line. And that's, as far as I know, that's the only new line of bees or new genetic material that's been introduced other than just naturally across borders. I think Canada is able to import from like New Zealand and different places. So those genetics are obviously probably coming south into us. And then the stuff in Brazil and, you know, Mexico is coming north into us. Yeah, the mean ones. I'm sorry, what did you say? I can't hardly hear you. Yeah, so Africanized honeybees, they're not necessarily new. They've been here for a little while. And they're really just a mad scientist project that got out. But yeah, they're technically a new genetic. I don't think they're as bad as everybody makes them out to be. The first F1 hybrids that were coming through were really aggressive, and that's something I've or defensive, I guess I should say. That's something I've noticed with my own bees is when you do a cross, the first F1 generation to come off of that cross is always going to be more defensive. So you could take two very gentle lines that are very distinct and far apart geographically, cross them, and that F1 daughter is going to produce workers that are more defensive for some reason. I think it's just that hybrid vigor brings that out of them. But yeah. No, they're 100% less than 24 hours old. Yes. Yes, and that's key. Yeah. Like, what do you mean? Yeah, that's all. Yeah, that's all one piece. Yeah. Well, yeah. So what I do is I go back out on day 10. So I graft when they're, let's just say I graft when they're 24 hours old, right? Which would mean that they're 4 days old technically, right? Because an egg for 3 days, and then they've been a larva for 1 day. So it's day 4 from egg. I go back out 10 days later, which is day 14 from egg, and I pull that frame out of there, and I take those queen cells, and I stick one in each one of the little mating nukes. Let's see if I can find it again here. Each one of these, right? So earlier in the day, I'll go out and I'll catch the queens in those. Like I explained, I'll be like, here's my queens. And then later on that day, I go back and I grab those queen cells and I stick one in each one of these boxes. Okay. And then 16 days later, I come back and repeat the process. So every 16 days, I catch queens out of these and I drop cells in. And it's just a cycle. So it's 10 days to set up, to prepare the cell starter. And then you graft 10 days later, you drop cells and catch queens. 6 days later, you're preparing again. I don't try to keep track of them in my head anymore. I just have like a calendar that I look at and I'm like, okay, today's grafting day. So that way I don't have to be like 6 days ago was 10 days plus. No, like I don't do it. I just have a calendar that does it.
This spring, I don't think we speak about secondary and tertiary swarms.
Uh-huh.
I think I had three, because the three I caught at the same location, just short time apart, they all had a mating queen. I've got them in boxes and I've watched them and now they've grown and started on their flight, but they weren't mating queens. There must have been a big swarm of this, wherever it is, sending out. Why weren't those secondary queens killed? You know, when one hatches out, and I've seen
Yeah.
people see them in trees and they'll find several smaller ones.
Right.
Close by. That's what I experienced this last week.
Yeah, I don't know, honestly.
I mean, you would think
Yeah.
they would kill them all, but
You would think that those virgins would fight
yeah.
in the middle of the swarm, right? Yeah.
Yeah, one was a swarm and tennis ball and almost a golf ball. I got them all.
Yeah. I honestly
See
just,
their queens growing, one was actually-
Yeah.
Don't understand why they kill them all.
probably something like that.
That's only
Yeah.
under swamps.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have them in like a.
Yeah, I know there, but.
Yeah.
why doesn't it have-
Yeah, I mean, in nature, the workers keep them separated. They don't-
Yeah.
Yeah. it's-
It probably has something to do with queen mandibular pheromone. So when a queen is laying, her queen mandibular pheromone is really strong. And so as they start their swarm process, they keep her from laying. They say, you can't lay eggs. And she gets small. She shrivels up basically, right? Like if you've ever bought a queen, they're real small in the cage and you put them in your hive and they swell up, right? Well, they're not producing as much pheromone when they're small. And so I'm assuming it has something to do with that. I don't know, to be honest, why they don't kill each other in a swarm when there's multiple queens in there. Maybe they are trying to fight each other and we just get to them before they can, you know, I don't know. Yeah. It's a really good question. I don't know. Yeah.
I saw it this last week. I've seen it on any.
Yeah.
Actually, it's in my yard.
Yeah. If I had to guess, it'd be a queen mandibular pheromone issue.
So we have an online question asking, do you requeen all colonies every year? I have some colonies that were outstanding last year, but the queen does not seem to be performing the same as last year. Wondering if I need to automatically requeen all of my colonies.
Right. A lot of beekeepers do. That's really a personal preference. I don't. I think once every 2 years is good. I think in my experience, a queen's most productive year is actually her second year. So if you like make a new queen, put it in the colony, she'll do great the first year. Like the vigor of a young queen like cannot be underestimated. But I feel like the following spring coming out is when she actually like booms the hardest. And so I don't requeen my colonies every year. I basically, when I find a colony that's, you know, or if I'll go into a yard and if like all of them kind of look a little, you know, they're just not progressing like they should, or I'm getting in there and I'm seeing like the markings on them are like from a year ago or 2 years ago, like, you know, they have a yellow marking and I'm like, yeah. So it's really, it's very subjective. You can basically, when your colony starts to become unproductive or it's showing signs of defensiveness, is a good time to requeen your colony. Otherwise, if it's doing good, then there's no reason to. You actually run a risk of killing your colony when you requeen it. So I always recommend against it. Anyone else?
How do you know all this stuff?
Well, I don't know, honestly, like, well,
He's not that old.
right. I am in my 30s, so I'm not as young as I look. Yeah. I've done a lot of reading, believe it or not. I love to read. And so, nope, I'm a first generation beekeeper. Yeah. So I love to read. I love to learn. I'm very good at self-education. And when I find something I'm passionate about, I master it. And that's what I've done. So 6 years. Yeah, no. So if you think about it, I've only extracted honey 6 times. Right? Yeah. I always like to think about that concept that if you've been doing beekeeping for 20 years, you've only extracted honey 20 times. Well, yeah, maybe if you extract more than once a year, but
Since you have to barehand grab queens, I assume you get stung a lot.
Yeah.
Queens.
queens.
I've been reading whether you build up immunity to build bee stings. Do you agree or not?
I honestly, I don't know. So that's a great question for a doctor who specializes in immune systems and stuff. I would argue that I guess this is my opinion. I'm not an expert. Okay. I like bees. That's about it. So this is my opinion though. I think that if you're going to go one of two paths, either you're going to go the path where you don't get stung ever. You get stung as least as you possibly, you always wear your suit. You're going to wear your veil, your gloves. Like you're just going to try your hardest to never get stung. Okay. That's one path. And the other path is you're just going to get stung all the time. And I think those are probably the two safest. Because if you're getting stung all the time, your body's building immunity to it. If you're just never getting stung, then you don't need immunity to it. But if you're kind of somewhere in the middle, I feel like maybe your body starts to get an allergy going there a little bit. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know if that's scientifically accurate. That's just what I think.
Stings hurt as much now as it did first.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like you get used to it, but it doesn't make it hurt less for sure. One of the things I've read that has to do with this is a little interesting was that I don't remember what the study was called. I'll have to look it up. But basically they found that if you wash your beekeeping clothes or gear with your regular clothes in your laundry, that can actually expose your family to very minute amounts of bee venom, which can cause your family members to gain an allergy to it. And I think they did a study, I'll have to find it, but where they found that people's beekeepers, family members were actually like way higher risk of anaphylaxis due to bee sting than just the normal population because of that. Yeah.
Once you have an anaphylactic reaction, it's that continuous.
Oh, like once you gain an allergy, does it go away? Everyone I've talked to that's had it, it doesn't go away. I don't know. Maybe there's medication for it, but I think once you have it, it's kind of, you got to be careful. Most people just get out of beekeeping at that point because it can kill you. So. Yeah. Yeah. Make sure to have an EpiPen with you and just be careful. Be getting your bees on nice days and say sweet little things to them, you know? Huh? Yeah. Yeah. When you open their lid, just make sure you like whisper something real nice in there. Like, you guys are doing such a good job. Thank you. You know, be really nice to them.
I used to be allergic to ants. I get one ant bite that I would smell up, end up in the emergency room. Started working with bees, got stung, and then got bit by an ant. Get stung by ants now.
Yeah. I go through phases. I get like, I'll go like a couple months without getting stung. And then for whatever reason, I'm just reckless for like a week and I get stung like 20 times. And so.
Yeah, just interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Are you talking about honeybees? Oh, well, our bees are European bees, right? They come from there.
Yeah, but we cleared them of the sting allergy when they come through custody.
Yeah, I don't know. You can gain an allergy. You can gain an allergy. So like you can get stung a bunch of times and be fine. And then there's just one time where it happens and you get the allergy to it. Yeah. So that's probably what's going on. Yeah, there's no such thing as an American honeybee.
Because I grew up here in Texas.
Okay. Yeah.
And wherever we found by mosquitoes that are in Florida, I get as well, but I don't know if I get by mosquitoes, so maybe there could be.
I have no idea. Maybe there's some kind of bacteria involved or something. I don't know. That's a good question. That's beyond my scope for sure. I can answer any question you want about, you know, beekeeping and queen rearing and genetic selection and all that stuff. But as far as like stinging stuff, I don't know. I'm not as good with that. But so did you guys have any other questions? Is there any curiosities I could satisfy?
Okay, so so I've got a hive.
Okay.
Swarms. So the original queen is now gone.
Yeah.
New queen's been developed.
Yeah.
So why would you be queen hive when it's automatic? That the old
Right.
queen's gone, new queen's come in, and that may happen.
Yeah. So do you live in a neighborhood? So what if that queen goes out and mates with a bunch of defensive bees and then you get a beehive that's really aggressive?
Or it moves into your attic.
Yeah.
So-
So I would say, like, for most hobbyists in this area, the main reason you would be requeening is for temperament reasons. To requeen the genetics for temperament. Yeah.
I was gonna, Mike. I was
Yeah.
gonna give a couple more.
Yeah.
If nobody else has any more questions for him. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, you know, everything he talked about, and this applies to all the different types of queen rearing. But you can also look up, if you get online, go to like Randy Oliver's thing. He has a thing called queen rearing for pennies. That's actually how I got started queen rearing, because I was just tired of paying for them. But there's other things you can do to do a smaller scale. So instead of, you know, grafting 60 queen cells, you can graft, you know, if you need three queen cells for your backyard hives, you could graft 10, and you'll have a couple extra maybe, hopefully. And there's also like the NICOT system. You can Google that, get on YouTube. There's tons of videos on how to use the NICOT system if you're scared of grafting. I've tried both of them. I actually like grafting better. It's a lot more controllable. And then there's different ways, like, you know, you say you graft 24-hour-old larva. I can't tell the difference myself between a 24-hour-old one and a 48-hour-old one. So I built a push-in cage. It has a queen excluder on the top. So I put the queen on a empty piece of empty frame. I put that on top of her, and then I time how long, you know, I put her on there the first day. Everything she lays that day is 1 day old. So I can come in there and bam, they're 24 hours old. Yeah, it's just I made it out of hardware cloth, and then I hot glued a piece of a queen excluder to the hole in the front. So that way they can still get in her feeder and stuff. There's lots and lots of little tricks in there. So. Yeah, I just encourage everyone. I mean, there are some parts that are hard, like using mate nooks. I've never had any luck with mate nooks. I bought like 5 of them every time they leave, so I just use regular nooks. I use 5-frame nooks, but I'm not trying to grow 150 queens at a time either. So there's lots of different little methodologies. There, what's that guy, Barnyard Bees on YouTube? He loves 2-frame nukes. He makes them out of MDF. There's 4-frame nukes, 5-frame nukes. You can use full-size hives if you have extras. There's a lot of different ways. So I encourage everyone to, you should try it at least once if you're going to stay a beekeeper. Yeah. Like the first time I did, I think I had like 40% take, which was actually enough to requeen all my hives, which is all I wanted to do anyway, because I didn't want to spend. I was buying bee weaver queens at the time, and I'm not paying $60 a queen. I don't care. And then there's other things you can do for genetics. Like what I do now is I buy a bunch of queens from Louisiana, and then I get like 10 of them. You know, I have 50 hives, so I get 10 of them, and then I'll pick the best one out of that. But at least I know they're F1s from that line. It depends on the. Well, it depends a lot on the queen rearer. So some queen rearers will make their queens, and then they'll queen bank them until your order time. They just put them on top of a hive, usually. Yeah, and then there's problems with. They've actually done some research where the workers will chew off those queens' feet. So when you put them in their hive, they're fine, they'll lay, but all the bees notice their feet aren't right, so then they supersede her. So the best queen breeders are not going to queen bank them, and they're going to mail them out the next day, and you're going to get them 24 hours later. So like the queen breeder I use out of Louisiana, they bag them up that day. I get them the next day by noon. So if they're shipping U.S. Postal Service, UPS is the way.
Propolis generation. Is that genetically, because you somehow advantage is coated with both, other ones are clean.
Yeah, it's like if you watch Bob Benny's series on YouTube, I watch a lot of YouTube. I don't read, I watch YouTube. That's my thing. I like Bob Benny. He started doing Carnolian queens now because they make more propolis. He thinks it's healthier for the bees. So yeah, the different genetics make
So
different
there is a
propolis.
certain class of bees that produce more propolis.
Yeah. So some people, in the past, most beekeepers didn't want to deal with propolis, but we didn't understand the antibacterial health benefits for the bee colony. So now beekeepers are looking for bees that make more propolis. So some beekeepers, personal preference, I guess. So some people like to take their hive bodies and rough the inside of them up so that the bees will propolize them.
I see black bees sometime on my plants. Is there a species of bees that's honeybee that's predominantly black?
Those are, I mean, the regular honeybees.
There's basic bees, but then there's,
You talking about European honeybees?
well, it looks like a European honeybee, but it's got more of a black body.
Yeah, those are German bees.
German. Okay.
Yeah, German genetics. Those are the original ones we had in Texas before, like I think till about around 1900 when they started moving around a lot. Yeah, we can do door prizes. I got T-shirts for sale over there. We
Yeah.
can do those after the meeting.
Let's see, the kind that Kyle has on, regular short sleeve shirt, those are $20. The kind I'm sporting, this one's 25. But the ones we have are more like a black sleeve, but yeah, it's the same kind of shirt as this.
Yeah, do cash, check. I guess we'll take PayPal
We
too.
can do cash and check. Do we have a way to do PayPal?
Same way you do your,
Yeah, just donate.
Okay, so you can do that for them if they're here? Okay. All right. Door prizes. You want to get that sheet?
Oh yeah. Huh? Oh yeah. I appreciate you coming out, man. That was a great talk. That was
yeah.
a lot better
Yeah.
than Sue's.
Michael. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very practical. I mean, you nailed it. Yeah, especially in an hour. Yeah, if you go to like some of these schools, like the Central Texas School, they probably have stuff on queenery. And then I'm waiting for Sue to come back down here and do a class in Texas. She does like a 3-day class. It's expensive, but yeah, I'll probably do that this summer too. Literally, like you can craft these many different things. I bought like 6 of them. Like a tree wrap. Chinese food. Even the Chinese food, I bought them from different people. Some of them are better than others. Sometimes you get a pack of 10, one of them's good, the rest.
Kyle, you want to do random number generator?
Sure.
So he's got it. Got it. 29. What is it?
18.
18. That's Kyle. No, Kyle doesn't want a prize.
Okay. 9.
Number 9. Ricardo Dominguez. I think that's what it says here.
Yeah, just, they're over there on the table.
Okay, so back on the table, there's a 6-month subscription to American Bee Journal. There's 3 different kinds of 2 like earring necklace and a business card holder, or the swarm box that Dan brought, which also has the swarm frames in it. And does it have some swarm trap stuff in there too? That little
Yes.
bottle? Yeah.
But that's got a qualifier
yeah.
on it now.
Okay. What's that?
Less than 5 hives.
Do you have more than 5 hives?
Less than 5 hives for the swarm trap.
If he has more than 5 hives, he wants to go to somebody who doesn't have 5 hives yet.
And the jewelry stuff came from Beekeepers, was the one that donated that.
Okay.
And the American Bee Journal was donated by Data.
Data.
And, next one, 27.
27. Lisbeth Chopette. So head on back, pick something out. Yeah, good. That's good. Go in the back and get something. Grab what you want. Or if you want that swarm trap, if you want to start beekeeping that way, you can do it. Get going.
24.
24. Looks like John Swanson, maybe.
19.
19 is James Damore. I think that's what that says. Okay.
More.
I think, is that it? Let me see. I'll go back there and look. Let's see if we got rid of everything yet.
Fourth then. Plus one. That's fine.
Okay. Yes, there's still this necklace, this, and that. Yeah. I don't know about that thing. What about the glove? What's that about?
That's Kyle's.
Oh, yeah, that's just there. It's
That's a
not-
decoration?
Decoration.
Yeah, I just hang mine on my fence in the backyard. It works. You don't even have to put that high up. All right.
One more.
I think we have one more back there.
13.
13 is Deanne Chandra. If I'm saying that right. I think you get a necklace. I'm pretty sure that's what's back there.
And then
Okay.
there's all the pamphlets up there, or catalogs and stuff. Y'all feel free to take one of those and start holding them back and forth.
Yeah. All right. So that pretty much adjourns our meeting. We'll do the mentor stuff right afterwards. If you guys would take your chairs and put them in these racks. So I think they want us to put them all up this time, right, Kyle?
Yeah, go ahead.
Put them all up. Yeah.
Comments, swarm trap, and I just bought that swarm ready to see it. So people